Welcome to the channel, genty boys. And girls, if there are any, welcome. For the best possible experience of this video, please listen using some good headphones or quality speakers, not just your smartphone speaker. In today's video, I'm going to show you a really cool trick I learned for recording bass guitar in a song with really low-tuned guitars. So before we go further, don't forget to like, subscribe, do the YouTube hokey pokey, turn yourself around, for that what it is truly all about in the eyes of the YouTube algorithm. Thank you in advance. So, modern metal has been following a trend going back decades of tuning the guitars lower, lower, and lower. Technically, it goes back even further with the lute and early guitars getting more bass strings added on. But as we all know, typically a bass guitar's lowest string is 1 octave below the lowest string on the guitar it is accompanying. For an example, a standard tuned guitar, its lowest string would be tuned to E2. So then the bass guitar accompanying said guitar, its lowest string would be tuned to E1, 1 octave below the guitar. Okay? Then we have 8-string guitars playing in drop E1, which is the exact same pitch as the lowest string on the standard tuned 4-string bass. So what do you do for the bass then? You could just use a regular bass tuned to drop E1, tuning up slightly the other 3 strings, and use it like that. The bass is supposed to fill in different frequencies than the guitar anyways, with the plugins, amps, speakers, IRs, and EQ used. This method can work. I have even used this approach on one of my band songs. The guitars are tuned to standard C#1, and so is the bass. It works, but to me it just feels like it is lacking something. So there is a second option. You could get an insanely long scale bass with gigantic strings and tune all the way down to E0 to accompany the drop E1 8-string guitar. That is something you can do, but now you might be saying, wait a second, D'Addario only makes bass strings sizes up to 135 gauge. And I use that on my 5-string bass for the low A0. How could I find a bass string big enough to do E0? Good question. Kalium is a company that actually makes gigantic bass strings. They are not a sponsor, but I have bought quite a few strings from them over the last several years. They have a very large variety of guitar string and bass string options, including strings for different scale lengths and different tunings. I have bought bass strings from them all the way up to the size 176 gauge, and the string was even made and meant for a 34-inch scale bass. Which brings us to our third option for recording bass guitar in a song with really low-tuned guitars. So, metal guitar players typically use a lot of power chords in their playing, but there is a phenomenon when you go low enough, power chords stop working. Or in other words, the notes played together that would make up a power chord stop sounding good together when played on one instrument. For me, this kind of starts at E1. Some people might say drop A1, aka 7-string tuning, is the lowest a power chord sounds good to them. Another person might say F#1 is the lowest you can go with the power chord still working. Of course, you can play power chords higher up on the fretboard, but in this context, I am talking about the lowest notes possible in each tuning. However, what if the guitar was playing one note of the power chord and the bass was playing the lower note of the power chord? Well, this is exactly what I did in my band's new song, My Cyanide. And if I may say so, it works quite well. The single, My Cyanide, is available to listen to on all of the music streaming platforms currently. Please give it a listen. So, what did you guys think? Sounds huge, right? So let me explain in a little more detail what is going on here. So the guitars are tuned to standard C sharp 1, and the bass is tuned to standard F sharp 0. The F sharp 0 and C sharp 1 make up two notes of a power chord. So instead of having to get even bigger strings and the longer scale bass to tune to C sharp 0, I'm able to record an accompanying bass track that brings the thunder and isn't lacking, all on a 34-inch scale 6-string bass. It is interesting because these two notes played together on a bass don't really sound good, but when you put the two notes on separate instruments, it works. Music has some funny instances like that, where certain notes shouldn't sound good together, but in the right circumstances, they work. So of course, I was talking about the lowest notes, but since things lined up, I just played the same frets on bass as I did on guitar, and it worked since I was just doing single note riffing for almost the whole song. And for the section with chords, I just didn't have the bass playing there. If you did want to use this same method for recording bass with your really low tuned guitars, it is important to remember this only worked for single note riffing. If you are going to throw in chords, playing the exact same fret on the lowest string from bass to guitar won't sound good anymore. Of course, it depends on the chord and what the root note of said chord is. You will probably need to hit a different note / different fret on the bass. However, with lots of bands tuning really low nowadays, I thought this would be a great trick to know. I am pretty pleased with the results, and I will make more songs in the future using this method for sure. And it is pretty useful since my band also has songs in standard F sharp 8-string tuning. I can use the exact same bass guitar. Efficient. Anyways, what do you guys think? Do you hate my idea? Do you love it? How do you think it sounded? Have you tried this out yourself? Please leave me a comment down below. I will also leave applicable links down below. Thank you for your time and making it all the way to the end of the video. Woot woot! Alright guys, let's get out of here and back to practicing and writing some awesome music. Take it easy.